Now, the Turkish military have begun crossing the border into Syria. That's according to an official. They aim to push back Kurdish militants days after the U.S. said it would not stand in the way. While President Trump's dramatic policy reversal appeared to surprise allies, dozens of American troops had been working closely with Kurdish-led forces in the fight against Islamic State. Well, we've also learned that Turkish state banks have rushed to prop up lira this week by selling dollars. That's as a country's planned incursion into Syria unnerved investors. Now, for more on this breaking story, our Turkey bureau chief, Onur Ant, joins us now on the phone from Istanbul. So first of all, Onur, do we exactly understand what the Turkish president's intentions are?
Well, we know a number of Turkish troops began crossing into Syrian territory this morning. This was a well-flagged move by Turkish officials, including Erdogan's head of communications, who tweeted earlier today that Turkey would shortly begin the operation. Now, we don't know whether the troops who entered Syria this morning really signal the beginning of the full-scale operation, or whether they are just a surveillance team who might be testing the waters before the full-scale operation begins. But we now know the Turkish troops are in Syria to push Kurdish rebels, Kurdish militants away from the border, which has been the long-run Turkish objective in northeastern Syria.
What does that mean for the economy? For the moment, the Turkish lira has held steady. Could that change?
Well, when the news of the Erdogan-Trump phone call, where the U.S. president seemed to have signaled the green light to Turkish operation, we saw a knee-jerk reaction in the currency. But since then has been fairly steady, including this morning when the actual news of the operation broke. But of course, like every other military operation, this brings its own geopolitical risks, and there's always a risk of a political and economic fallout, including for the currency.
Breaking news now. President Trump tonight defending his plan to withdraw American troops from a region of Syria that's home to some of America's oldest allies in the region. If the troops do leave, Turkey would be free to launch military operations against the Kurds, an ancient enemy of Turkey, but again, long a key ally of the United States. Speaking after a signing ceremony at the White House, the president claimed his decision was not intended to favor anyone.
I'm not siding with anybody. We've been in Syria for many years. You know, Syria was supposed to be a short-term hit. Just a very short-term hit, and we were supposed to be in and out. That was many, many years ago.
Well, still, even some of the president's most resolute supporters say the planned withdrawal is flat wrong. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, for one, said the decision should be reversed because it would, and I quote, only benefit Russia, Iran, and the Assad regime. Senator Lindsey Graham, as you know, a staunch defender of the president when it comes to the Ukraine and Russia investigations, told Fox News in a phone interview the withdrawal was, quote, short-sighted and irresponsible. Former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley was even stronger on Twitter, tweeting, quote, we must always have the backs of our allies if we expect them to have our back. The Kurds were instrumental in our successful fight against ISIS in Syria. Leaving them to die is a big mistake. Hashtag Turkey is not our friend. Joining me now, retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Peters, a military strategist and author. Colonel Peters, you just heard the president say that late today that he's, quote, not siding with anybody, and he claims he told Turkey's president, Erdogan, that there'd be, quote, trouble if anything, quote, outside of what we think is humane happens. Can the Kurds count on that?
No, of course not. And the president, unfortunately, he lies like a little boy caught stealing from his mom's purse. When you unilaterally withdraw the U.S. forces, the tripwire forces, protecting the best allies we have ever had in the Middle East outside of Israel, at the behest of an Islamist despot who despises the United States and wants to slaughter our best allies, then I'd say you're taking sides, Anderson.
The president tweeted today, in part, as I've stated strongly before, and just to reiterate, if Turkey does anything that I, in my great and unmatched wisdom, consider to be off limits, I will totally destroy and obliterate the economy of Turkey. I've done before. I mean, how do you even respond to that? The idea that I don't know of anybody who actually does have great and unmatched wisdom ever saying they have great and unmatched wisdom.
I feel like we're on Saturday Night Live, but my God, in my unmatched wisdom, you can't believe a word Trump says. And he was surprised by the backblast. I mean, clearly, on a phone call, Trump lives in the moment. Erdogan conned him. Trump did what Erdogan told him to do, convinced it was the right thing to do, was shocked by the backblast, even from Republicans who amazingly found some spine on this. And now he's waffling, backtracking. He doesn't want to leave the forces there because then it looks like he folded. And I think right now, while the Kurds are under great threat, Trump doesn't know what to do. And my concern is that Erdogan, who's just been itching to kill the Kurds, to just slaughter them, may move pretty quickly.
It also, I mean, the message it sends to other nations or other groups who might, you know, in the future, that the U.S. might need to work with.
Trump has consistently attacked our allies, great and small, from NATO to the Kurds. At the same time, he has repeatedly and enthusiastically embraced despots, Kim Jong-un, Erdogan of Turkey, al-Sisi in Egypt, President Xi with that on and off relationship, and let us not forget Vladimir Putin, whose birthday it is today, and who is set to profit greatly from the U.S. abandonment of the Kurds. First of all, the Syrian government, Russia's client, and the Iranians are also ready to pounce, not just the Turks. The Kurds may be forced, as we abandon them, if Trump lives up to this and does that, they may be forced into the arms of Iran, for God's sakes, and the Russians. So with his impulsive idiocy last night, Trump has endangered not just the Kurds, but the progress made against ISIS, and in fact, the entire region. It's amazing that so small a gesture to Trump could have world-shaking reverberations.
Also criticism from, I mean, as you noted, it was, I don't know if it was surprising, but for GOP, which has pretty much remained silent on saying anything negative about President Trump, you did have Lindsey Graham, who's become one of, Trump's biggest, boosters, and Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, obviously a staunch supporter of the president, at least publicly, quickly calling him to reverse his decision.
Well, I think what you're seeing, Anderson, is schizophrenia on Capitol Hill in the Senate and the Republican Party, whereas they are still committed to American security, and so they'll go after Trump on this. But they still don't seem to be committed to the Constitution, to which they took their oath. When it comes to the Constitution and Trump's violations, they're still willing to condone it. And one would hope that at some point, more and more Republicans will get the backbone and realize that at the end of their lives, it's not going to matter how rich they are. It's not going to matter how many times they were reelected. What will matter is, as for all of us, did they do the right thing for their country? Did they do the honorable thing? Even apart from illegality, did they behave ethically and morally? And so far, the answer is resounding no.
Colonel Peters, appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Trump loses his cool. It started with more than a dozen tweets, including this, a clear loss of temper, accusing Democrats of all caps bull expletive. He, of course, as you can see, used the actual word. And then Trump went on camera, lashing out with a crude reference in front of a world leader and all Americans.
Adam Schiff, he's a lowlife. He should be forced to resign. There's an expression, he couldn't carry his blank strap. I won't say it because they'll say it was so terrible to say. But that guy couldn't carry his blank strap. Do you understand that?
Yeah, we understand that. He was talking about Adam Schiff, comparing him to Mike Pompeo. And as Trump continued to face questions, he lost control of his temper.
He should resign from office in disgrace. The whistleblower was so dishonest. These are bad people. These are dishonest people. And when the American people find out what happened, it's going to be a great day. They've been trying to impeach me from the day I got elected. You people should be ashamed of yourself. What happened in 2016 is a disgrace to this country. And they're more worried about that because they know they're guilty as hell. And let me tell you something. Biden's son is corrupt, and Biden is corrupt.
Okay, and then he went on to say this.
I watch my words very carefully. There are those that think I'm a very stable genius, okay? I watch my words very, very closely.
Well, if he was watching his words very, very closely, he would not have said this again and again and again today to describe the call where he asked a foreign leader to investigate Joe Biden.
The conversation was perfect. A perfect conversation. It was a very nice conversation. You have a perfect, I mean perfect conversation. That was a perfect conversation. That was a perfect conversation. It was perfect. The call was perfect. It was perfect. It was perfect. A beautiful conversation.
Well, of course, it was not perfect. In the transcript, which Trump today bragged was word for word, which of course it was not, Ukraine's president said, "We are ready to continue to cooperate for the next steps. Specifically, we are almost ready to buy more javelins from the United States for defense purposes." The president replied, quote, "I would like you to do us a favor, though, because our country has been through a lot and Ukraine knows a lot about it." Not perfect. Wrong. Here's Republicans Mike Turner and Mitt Romney talking about that very same call.
This remains deeply troubling.
I want to say to the president, this is not okay. It isn't, that conversation is not okay.
And today, when confronted with what he said and exactly what he wanted Ukraine's president to do about the Bidens, Trump, the person who has no problem answering any question, did this.
The question, sir, was what did you want President Zelensky to do about Vice President Biden and his son Hunter?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, it was just a follow-up of what I just asked you, sir.
Listen, you ready? We have the president of Finland. Ask him a question.
I have one for him. I just wanted to follow up on the one that I asked you, which was,
Did you hear
what
me?
did you want
Did you hear me?
Yes,
Ask him a question.
I will, but
I've given you a long answer. Ask this gentleman a question. Don't be rude.
No, sir, I don't want to be rude. I just wanted you to have a chance to answer the question that I asked you.
I've answered everything. It's a whole hoax. And you know who's playing into the hoax? People like you and the fake news media that we have in this country. And I say in many cases, the corrupt media, because you're corrupt. Much of the media in this country is not just fake, it's corrupt. And you have some very fine people, too. Great journalists, great reporters. But to a large extent, it's corrupt and it's fake. Ask the president of Finland a question, please.
Okay, I'll move on now. Mr. President, the WTO ruled today in favor of the United States, saying that the United States can now impose tariffs on European goods because of illegal subsidies against Airbus.
That was a big win for the United States, right?
It was.
You never had wins with other presidents, did you? But we're having a lot of wins at the WTO.
This was a case that started, I think, 10 or 15 years ago.
Okay.
But
excuse me. Your wins are now because they think I don't like the WTO and they want to make sure I'm happy. Because all of those countries were ripping off the United States for many years. They know that I'm wise to it. We've had a lot of wins. This was a $7 billion win. Not bad.
But I think the question is for me.
The question.
Okay, out front now, I want to go to the reporter who was asking the president those questions, Jeff Mason, White House correspondent for Reuters. And Jeff, I wanted everyone to see exactly what happened there. Let's just be clear with one thing, first and foremost. The president of the United States did not answer your question, which you asked loudly and clearly and repeatedly. What did you want Vice President Zelensky to do about Vice President Biden and his son Hunter? He didn't answer.
No, he didn't answer, and he was certainly given opportunities to do so. And Aaron, it's a legitimate question. He's been saying, as you've been talking about already in your program, that his call with President Zelensky was quote unquote perfect, praising himself for having released that transcript. And so I thought it was good just to get a sense right now here, after that call has happened and after all the controversy has occurred, to get a sense from him as to what he really wanted, and he wanted to avoid the question.
He certainly did. So then he refuses to answer your question, demands that you ask one to the president of Finland, which you did, and then he jumps in anyway and doesn't let him answer it, which sort of was the priceless part about the whole thing. But my question to you, Jeff, is his anger and frustration today that you saw in that room, did it seem strategic to you, or did it seem like his anger really got the better of him?
I'm not convinced it was strategic, no, Aaron. I think that he's just upset and frustrated by how the impeachment inquiry is now going. He lashes out at journalists. He lashes out at the media in particular when he feels under pressure, when he feels frustrated. I think that's what he did today. I don't think that was strategic in that he would have had to think ahead of what the question might be or of what our exchange would be like. And I think instead it was just a show of exasperation on his part, both in the Oval Office, which you showed earlier, and in that press conference about this entire thing. I mean, he walked off the stage when there was supposed to be another question from the Finnish side. So that was a sign that he was just done.
He was just done, and he'd had it. But again, I want to make the point here that you asked a very simple question, and he could have answered it. He loves to answer questions, but he did not. I mean, he just point blank did not.
Yes, and it gets to the heart of this entire controversy. I mean, if he wants to say that he was not looking for the president of Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden, despite what it says in that transcript, then he needs to say that, or he needs to explain it, and he hasn't done that.
All right, Jeff Mason, thank you very much, doing his job and asking the questions as he should be doing on behalf of the American people. Out front now, our senior political reporter, Nia Malika Henderson, political analyst David Gregory, Ren Donut, who represented President Clinton during his impeachment hearings, and the former Nixon White House counsel, John Dean. So, Nia, you know, it's interesting when you see that exchange, right? It was a simple question.
Yeah.
If the president wanted to take issue with what was in the transcript or say, you know, it was inaccurate or it was misleading, he could have. He didn't. Because it's all there. He didn't want to talk about it.
He didn't want to talk about it. And I think you see echoes of that in other Republicans, right? They don't want to talk about the substance of this call, primarily the part about Biden, right? The idea that the American president is asking a foreign leader to meddle in a foreign election. Feels like we just went through that with the Mueller report. The president didn't seem to kick off impeachment hearings after the Mueller report was released. And here, with this call that was revealed through this whistleblower, clearly is under his skin. He's clearly worried about it. I think they're probably second-guessing the fact that they actually released this transcript, which does pretty perfectly capture the substance of it, right? It's not a word-for-word transcript, but it's certainly a memo that captures the spirit of
and of course, the great irony is, you know, everyone involved, obviously it's incredible, it's accurate,
right.
but he says every, you know, it's a word-for-word exact thing, which it isn't. You would think he would be trying to seize on that, David. I mean, look, there are photos today of the president during his first meeting with the leader of Finland, which was talking to reporters. And look, I understand these are moments, okay? You can capture anyone in a moment, but we just saw him speaking. We saw his tone. You know, sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words.
Well, it is, and I think it's actually not worth a whole lot parsing the outrageous things he says, the crude and the unpresidential things he said. The president has been doing this now for a couple of years, and people will make a decision about that. If there's a political price to pay, he may yet pay it. But this is who he is as the president of the United States. I think two things today. One, I think he's increasingly erratic because he's increasingly isolated. You know, we know from Bob Woodward's reporting in the book Fear that when the Mueller report, not the report, when Mueller became the special prosecutor, he had this outraged response that he couldn't believe this was happening to him and thought it was the end of his presidency. And to see it rearing its head again, I think is something that has so completely thrown him. It explains how isolated he feels at this juncture. The other piece of it is he knows how to do one thing, which is fight and identify enemies. He is going to be the tip of the spear on the response. He wants to take out everyone to delegitimize this, and it is the risk that Democrats are taking by doing this essentially in an election year. He's going to seize on that to try to win.
So Glenn, what do you make of his behavior today and how he handled it?
It's disorienting. I watched the clip and was kind of amazed. You know, back during the Clinton impeachment, President Clinton was plenty angry about being impeached. He thought that impeachment was improper and illegitimate, and candidly, I did and do as well. But with all that anger, he never questioned the basic legitimacy of government. He never threatened to have people imprisoned or charged with treason. He never talked about civil war. And he was hot. He was angry, as we all were. This is a completely new moment in history, and it's scary to see.
I mean, and certainly, obviously, you're referring to when he talked about, you know, civil war, if he were impeached over the weekend in a tweet.